Thank you, Benu. The BBC Mastermind days were obviously days when I relied more on organic intelligence than artificial intelligence. Shifting tracks just a little bit now. So I think really there are two things that are fundamentally changing marketing right now. And if you're in marketing, this is going to affect you if it's not affecting you already. One, AI is really top of mind for marketers. But for AI to work well, it needs a lot of data. It needs a lot of the right kind of data. And that's sort of the crux to getting AI to work right. So that's sort of one. But the second part, which is happening, which is kind of interrelated, is that due to regulations like GDPR, due to incidents like Cambridge Analytica, brands are starting to realize that the right kind of data is actually going to be increasingly first-party customer data rather than third-party data, which is packaged and resold. It's all going to be about trust. It's all going to be about privacy. So how do these brands, these brands make that transition from an old world which did not have AI, was primarily about third-party data? How do they make this transition over to this new world where AI will really power everything and first-party customer data will come to the fore? So that's sort of what I'm going to be examining in my talk today. And really, to do that, we at Blueshift conducted a study with an independent party called Tech Validate. And the study results are pretty fascinating, and I'll be walking you through that. So firstly, I think the dream state for all of us marketers is we want to get to a place where AI, self-driving AI is driving our campaigns, right? So just like self-driving cars, we want self-driving campaigns. So how realistic is that, right? So in some sense, the AI part of that is here today, because obviously Google is able to deploy self-driving cars on the road. It's still being tested, but the AI is still, the technology is here. But what is challenging is, if you think about what else is needed to make the self-driving car happen, it's the amount of data that has to come together, both in real time and a historical point of view of the roads and the conditions, for the self-driving car to make the right decisions and for it to avoid hitting other cars. So just like that in marketing, we need to have the right amount of data, the right amount of real-time data, the right amount of historical data, and we'll be talking a lot about that. So are we there yet? I think that's sort of the question. Are we there yet? As I mentioned, in some sense we are. In many other ways we are not. So let's actually dig into our study to examine what we found. As we talk to a broad variety of B2C marketers primarily, not so much B2B, but within B2C marketers, what we found is a few very, very interesting things which I'm going to share with you. So the first thing we found is that marketers are able to make use of Facebook's AI or Google's AI, but not their own AI on their own data. So what I mean by that is, if you think about sort of you're running ads on Google, you're running ads on Facebook, you think about sort of audience expansion, lookalike audiences. So clearly, Facebook and Google are doing great jobs sort of providing you their AI, and they are doing it on their data. But there are many other ways for you to engage your own customers, and you're not able to use your data with your own AI. So that's the first thing we found. The second thing we found is that marketer-controlled data access, and I'll talk about what that means. Marketer-controlled data access leads to a lot more AI deployments, right? So, and we'll come to that in more detail about what that means. But keep this in mind, marketer-controlled data access is very, very important to success of AI in marketing. The third thing we found is that most marketers are still struggling to activate customer data, right? So most marketers are still struggling to activate customer data. And maybe the last thing we found is that successful data activation, if you do it right, obviously a lot of people are struggling, but if you do it right, it correlates with revenue success, right? So this is the quick summary, but let me go through all of these findings in detail. So the first one, like I mentioned, is that marketers have started using AI, right? So there's some show of hands here, and in other places we have done shows of hands. People have started using AI, and they also anticipate increased usage. So if you ask marketers what's going to happen next year, they anticipate increased usage. So the first part of that is if you ask marketers, are you using AI? they list some of the goals they're using AI for. And if you look at this chart, it actually starts telling you that they're using AI primarily for audience expansion, audience targeting, going back to my previous point about sort of the using Facebook's data, using Google's data, but not your own data. I think that's sort of the piece that's coming out here. But it's still good. They're starting to use AI in some form, which is great. But the flip side of it is, or the correlated part of it is that, they expect even more usage of AI next year, which is great, which is all exciting news to us so far. So what is the problem? I think the problem is, as we mentioned, people are still using very basic forms of AI, and they're depending on these third-party platforms for delivering that AI to them. And there are two examples I want to show to sort of clarify what I mean here. One is when we ask marketers about personalization, right? And personalization means a lot of different things. But we said, do you use predictive models in your personalization? Do you use collaborative filtering in your personalization? Guess how many are using that today? 6%, right? 6% compared to 82% of marketers who are saying they're using some form of AI. 6% are saying they're using in personalization with predictive models. We asked them, when you do segmentation of customers, do you use predictive affinities? 16%, right? Now again, compared to that 82% number, people are saying we're using AI. Are they using it with their data for advanced use cases? Not quite, right? So there's some problem here. There's a lot of good news here, but there's also some bottlenecks here. So the question is, why are marketers being held back? Why are marketers being held back, right? The technology is here. Clearly the technology is here. Facebook is using it. Google is using it. So why are marketers being held back? And I think this goes back to that data question. And we started asking, is it related to marketers being able to access data? And we found that was indeed the case. So this is the point I had mentioned earlier, that marketer-controlled data access leads to 2 to 3 times higher likelihood of them deploying AI successfully, right? So an example of this is, we take the same examples as the previous slide. We did this question about segmentation. So if you look at marketers who control access to their own data, they don't have to go through IT, they have advanced access to their data, almost 2.5x lift in terms of deployment of advanced AI, right? So that's pretty significant. And the other example we had taken was personalization. Again, 2.8x higher deployment in AI if you actually have advanced control over data. So this is a pretty big finding, and this might say, well, that's pretty amazing. And actually what's more amazing about this is marketers who actually control their own data access, have advanced data access, also end up using more of their data in their campaigns, right? So what does that mean? So we looked at marketers who have IT-controlled data versus more advanced direct-controlled data. And the percentage of these marketers who are able to use at least half of their data, dramatically different, right? So the people who have marketer-controlled data access are using more of their data, and they're deploying more of it in their campaigns. So you might say, well, that's all great. That solves the problem. So that's the end of the story. I think we just have to get there. But unfortunately, that's not the end of the story, because most marketers are not here. Most marketers are actually in a place where they're still struggling with customer data. They're still struggling with customer data, and that is hindering their AI efforts. And why are they struggling with customer data? They're struggling for reasons around analysis. They're struggling for reasons around access. They're struggling for reasons around segmenting quickly. And they're struggling for reasons around unifying data, right? So it's a lot of struggles for marketers in getting all this right. And if they don't get this right, their AI efforts are not going to go anywhere. So that's sort of one big part of the story. And related to this is the fact that because of all these struggles, more than half the marketers out there use less than half of their customer data, right? So we are not talking about Cambridge Analytica data. We are talking about your own data. More than half the marketers using less than half of their own data, right? So that's a pretty shocking finding. Obviously something which all of us in this room would like to correct. But then the question is this even important? Is this the question we should be focused on? Should we be focused on trying to increase the amount of data that's being used? Maybe it just sounds fancy. Maybe it doesn't really matter. So we started asking, like, does all of this have any correlation to business results, specifically to revenue, right? And we started saying that actually successful data activation correlates to revenue success, right? So what do I mean by that? So we asked marketers, did you exceed your revenue plans, or did you sort of fall below, right? And correlated that with their use of data, their use of AI. And we started finding marketers who are using 75% or more of their data, they are 1.4 times more likely to actually exceed their revenue plans, right? Which is pretty dramatic. So all of this stuff obviously matters. I mean, if you deployed more data, if you activated for AI, this matters. And in a similar vein, we also ask people sort of like, how quickly are you doing segmentation? How quickly are you deploying that data? Is your data use actually pretty advanced, or is it kind of shallow? And the people who are, when we compare people who are using real-time segmentation versus those who are, segmenting at a weekly, daily, monthly basis, dramatic difference in revenue performance. Dramatic difference in revenue performance, right? So if you're a CMO out here, and if you're thinking about next year's revenue plans, this is what you got to keep in mind. So this is a summary of what we found. And I think based on this, you might ask, okay, what should I do? What should I do as a marketer, right? So there are a few suggestions we put forth. And we have more details. The full study is available on our website, blueshift.com, to download. But the few suggestions from our side are definitely, number one, make 2018 the year to put your customer data to work using AI, right? So the time is now. The technology is available. The tools are available. It's a matter of focus, prioritization, getting the data right. So that is number one. Number two, I think, you got to actually, it takes a few different things for it all to come together. And we call it the 4 Ps of marketing. Obviously, people who have been from the world of Kotler and others know the other 4 Ps. But the 4 Ps of marketing that apply to this right now are people, platform, process, and performance. So think about sort of how you align your teams to be able to activate that data. How do you bring that AI mindset into your team? That's the people part. Think about the platforms that can actually help centralize that data. Think about sort of the processes which change because now AI is making a lot more of your decisions. And finally, think about the performance gains because that's where you're going to win. The third recommendation we have is, invest in marketer-controlled data, which is kind of duh because, all the conclusions, all the findings sort of scream at that. So many companies, I think marketing data customer data is still being withheld, by IT in some sense, not in a bad way, not in a mean way, but it's just that, legacy technologies just are not marketer friendly. So how do you think about sort of making that customer data become marketer controlled? That's sort of the third recommendation. And the fourth one is really choose an AI platform which non-technical marketers, because now we are talking about, we don't want marketers sitting and writing code. We don't want marketers actually, really thinking about the intricacies of the AI. But at the same time, the marketers must be able to trust the AI. They need to understand the AI to be able to deploy it to business use cases. They need to be able to combine their creativity with the power of AI. And for that, I think they need to invest in platforms that non-technical marketers can understand and also operate on every channel, right? So these are the top recommendations from our side. And the question is sort of, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what Blueshift does for those who are not familiar with us. So our focus as a company, our mission is to help marketers activate their data across every channel using AI. So truly power AI-based marketing on all channels. Funnily enough, we talked about ABM before this, and we talked about IBM. So we are AIBM in some sense, AI-based marketing. And what you're seeing on the screen, is basically sort of is a customer journey that has been entirely orchestrated by AI, right? Which is possible today, which is a big big step forward. And what's happening there, unfortunately, it's a little grainy to read maybe for the back of the room. But what's happening in that customer journey is that the customer is being entered into the journey based on an AI computed score. So if the AI computes that you're, as of this moment, likely to perform a certain action, you get entered into the campaign. And then the content of the campaign is entirely personalized to you based on AI, based on recommendation engines, which can span multiple different sectors. And finally, the channel preferences, the timing, all of that is getting optimized by AI. So that is sort of the magic that's happening here, which is truly self-driving AI. So the technology exists, which doesn't mean that you don't have to think harder about the data challenges and the processes and the people. But this is possible, and we have companies like Lending Tree, companies like Udacity, which teaches the whole world about AI. When they need to use AI in their own marketing, they've used Blueshift, as well as companies like a BBC, Interactive Corp, parts of PayPal, many other sort of consumer brands who are using this technology. So that's sort of the exciting news for all marketers out here. So how does this work from a customer experience point of view? So this is what's happening. Here's an example of the customer experience you're delivering. And the customer experience is, on the one hand, obviously, there might be a customer who is interacting with your website, with your mobile app, with your store, and there's data being generated, not only about that customer, but also about all customers who are interacting with your brand. And the graph of all those interactions is now powering one-to-one communications or marketing on every channel. In this example, that graph is powering an email to this customer, email is obviously one of the channels. There's a mobile push notification being sent out with one-to-one recommendations. There is a piece of, there's a website recommendation piece. There's, Facebook ad that's come out. And all of these are perfectly orchestrated, and you could also add direct mail and what have you into this mix to create a compelling cross-channel orchestration. So that's sort of what the end experience looks like. And the way we deliver that is through a combination of three things. One is sort of like a memory. The second is sort of like a brain, and third is like a body. So the memory piece is really all about the customer data, right? So the first part of it is to build a real-time updating index of all customer data. As soon as that happens, the index should get updated. That's sort of our memory piece. This memory piece is then connected to the brain. And the brain is really the AI engine, which is building out the predictive scores, is building out the recommendations, is doing the optimization. And finally, there's the body piece, which is the workflow, which is actually taking the intelligence and delivering that piece of direct mail, that Facebook ad, that email, or what have you, right? So that's sort of the way the system is built, which is fully integrated. And, and that's sort of how it all comes together. So fun fact, I think people ask me why did we choose the name Blueshift? And I'm sure people, you might have some guesses. But one answer I like to give is, everyone's familiar with, in the context of data, people are familiar with Amazon Redshift, which is a data warehouse. And what I like to say is, data warehouses are where data goes to sleep. So Amazon Redshift is where data goes to sleep, and Blueshift is where data goes to work. So really, if you want to think about putting your customer data to work, if you wanted to make it work for you, think about Blueshift, and that's sort of the analogy. So thank you to TiE. Really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you to this wonderful audience who have been here, and I'm open to all questions. The last parting thought I have, or the parting question I have for this group is, think about, are you working for your customer data, or is your customer data working for you, right? So think about it again. Are you working for your customer data, or is your customer data working for you? In most companies I see, there are data programs where you put a bunch of people and they're working to collect data and organize data, and doesn't impact the customer experience for many months or years, or maybe never. So really, you end up working for your data. And then, I think the smart companies are the ones where the data is automatically working for you through AI, right? And that's sort of the big difference. And the brands that are going to win tomorrow are the ones which will really understand this, which will be able to put your customer data to work through AI. So my parting thought for this group is, if you're in the former group, if you're feeling like you're working for your data, and if you want to get to the place where you want data to work for you, AI might just be the answer. Thank you. Thank you.